So, inspired by my trip to Challen Falls a couple of weeks ago, I thought today I might share a few tips about what to do when you're going hiking to do landscape photography. Now, these aren't supposed to be extensive hiking tips, but more specifically focused for when you're doing photography. Okay, so getting right into it, my first tip is don't take too much gear with you. So this is obviously very dependent on what sort of hike you're doing and your fitness levels, because some people can carry a lot more quite comfortably than others. Now, if you're a moderately fit person like I am, and you're doing something strenuous, you don't want to take so much gear that you end up not enjoying the hike and not taking very many photos because you're too tired. You know, sometimes we think, oh, I just take that lens just in case. But if taking that lens makes you so tired that you don't end up using the lens because you can't be bothered actually taking your camera out and changing it, it's completely worthless. So, a few ways that you can cut down. Firstly, not most obviously, just consider taking a single zoom lens with you, or maybe 2 or 3 really small prime lenses. So ask yourself whether you really need to take a tripod with you. Maybe hand holding is going to be fine. I mean, cameras these days, their high ISO noise is so much better, and the image stabilization is so much better that a lot of the time you can get away with hand holding. But maybe you're going somewhere and you want to do some slower shutter speeds. You know, could you use a monopod for that? Because if you can, that will save you some weight too, swapping that out for the tripod, and you can double using it as a walking pole if you want. Another way that I save weight, when I'm just taking the single lens on my camera, and I'm carrying my camera most of the time anyway, so it's not in my bag, is that I switch out my camera bag for a hiking backpack, which this weighs about ½ kilogram less than my hiking backpack. And then I've got just a very simple little lightweight cover that can go over my camera if I'm wanting to actually put my camera in my bag, just to stop it from getting scratched. And the other thing is going through all your little bits and pieces. Now, this is something I normally put into my bag. It's got all sorts of things. It's got my Zoom recorder in it. It's got a little light. It's got spare batteries. It's got a top handle for doing video with the camera. But a lot of this stuff I don't need to take with me when I'm doing a long hike like this, for instance. So you can probably save a fair bit just with cutting down on those little bits and pieces. Okay, so you've cut down the amount of gear you're taking. You decided not to take a tripod, but you've got a monopod for support because you want to take some photos with a slower shutter speed. So this tip is to make sure you leave your image stabilization on while you're using the monopod, because that's going to help with eliminating any little movements that you might have with the slower shutter speed. So for the third tip, something that I certainly became aware of on my last trip up to Challen Falls is that if you are doing creek crossings or having to do anything like that around water where you have to cross water and there's a potential that you could fall in. Oh shit! Take some dry bags with you. It's going to put your mind at ease knowing that if you do happen to fall in, that you're not going to completely destroy your camera. Now, speaking of protecting your gear, I highly recommend that you have all your stuff insured, both for it getting stolen but also things like it falling off a cliff or into a river or such. So that way you've got a bit of peace of mind that if the worst does happen, you can at least get your stuff replaced. Okay, so this isn't specifically photography related, but it is related to the creek crossings that we were talking about before. And that is, if you are, well, actually anytime you go on a hike, just take a change of clothing with you in the car, and that's complete from underwear right through, so that if you do get wet or dirty or muddy or whatever from rain or falling in a creek or something like that, that once you finish and you get back to the car, you can get a change of clothing, so you don't have to be wet for your entire trip home. Okay, so for this tip, it's all about time. If you're going for a hike and you're taking photos, you want to make sure you give yourself a lot of extra time for doing that photography, because you don't want to end up feeling like you can't actually stop and take photos when you come across something that really interests you. So start as early in the day as you can and give yourself heaps of time. And as a little side bonus tip for this one, always stick a headlamp in your bag, so that if by some chance you do end up out too late, that you can at least find your way on the path. Okay, so since you've now given yourself plenty of time for taking photos when you go on your hike, don't be afraid to stop along the way and take pictures of what catches your eye. Don't get so caught up in wanting to get to a particular destination you've got in mind that you ignore other things that you see, because I've had that happen before. If you go back to one of my early vlogs, which I'll put a link to, that was from when I was in Scotland, I was so eager to get to this waterfall that I didn't stop and take enough time in the forest that we went through to get there. And as it turned out, the forest was much more impressive than the waterfall was photographically. Now, on our trip to Challen Falls, Rory and I did stop and take pictures at places that we saw along the way. So that is, I think, a really big tip photographically. If you've got any great hiking or hiking with photography tips, pop them in the comments below, because I'd love to hear from them. And I hope there's something in my tips that's helped you next time you go out for a hike to take some photos. Okay, now I'll catch you next time for a vlog. I think I'm going to be down at Currumbin beach for a sunrise at that spot that I was at for sunset a few weeks ago. So fingers crossed the weather's okay. All right, catch you all later. Bye. Oh my God. Getting soaked. Oh dear. So I may have got a touch wet.